Hello, I'm Rowena Crosby, president of Tero International, a training company specializing in the research, development, and facilitation of interpersonal skills training programs with an emphasis on leadership. When leaders are interviewed and asked about their best personal leadership experience, in almost every case, they talk about a time when they were leading change. Why? Because it is during times of change that people most need leaders. The research reveals that it isn't the mechanics of change that are most challenging for leaders, it's the emotional toll that change takes on people. In this presentation, we're going to debunk 3 common misconceptions many of us fall prey to that prevent us from leading as effectively as we could during times of change. I invite you to do a self-audit during this talk to gain insights on your leadership. Before we examine the misconceptions surrounding change and leadership strategies, let's examine why change is so hard. We do many things throughout the day without conscious thought. We operate out of habit. Habits are helpful to us. They allow us to do 2 things at the same time. Because I can drive my car unconsciously, I can also talk on the phone and listen to the radio or an audiobook. That is, until I'm driving in a blinding storm, and then the driving must become conscious. And that's stressful. Research suggests we spend 85% of the day operating out of habit. If you have ever tried to change a habit, you know how challenging it is. And if you wonder if you operate unconsciously most of the day, simply try this little experiment. Move your wastebasket to the other side of your desk. Call me and tell me how long you're tossing trash on the floor and how frustrating it is. Change pushes us out of our comfort zone. It causes us to have to become conscious, and that's why it's so hard. Sometimes we're championing a change to improve things. Other times, the changes are thrust upon us. In either case, a leader's challenge is to recognize that change requires people to break habits, and that takes a lot of extra energy and thought. To examine the first major misconception surrounding change, reflect on a major change in your life. It could be a career change, the birth of a child, the death of a loved one, marriage, divorce, a health crisis. How many of those changes involved an element of loss? All changes, both positive and negative, begin with a loss. They first begin with letting go of the old. Those leading the charge, not surprisingly, are heavily focused on the new. They are victims of the erroneous thinking that change begins with the new. While it's tempting to think that way, this mistake in leading change is a major cause of failure. In reality, change begins with an ending. Before we can move into the new, we must first leave the old. Leaders who fail to recognize this lead change at their peril. William Bridges wrote about this intuitively logical notion in his excellent book, Managing Transitions. As Bridges described it, transition is the emotional process a person goes through to get from something old to something new. Before you arrive at the new location, you must leave home, travel through what Bridges calls the neutral zone, which is neither home nor the intended destination. The process of breaking away from the ending, getting used to the idea of what you've lost, as well as that with which you're not yet comfortable, and slowly warming up to the idea of the new situation, takes time, patience, and understanding. Consider a physical move. This involves little more than having a moving van or your friends in a truck transfer your possessions from the old to the new. However, the change, as anyone who has made it knows, involves more than a physical move. You begin with letting go of the old, thinking about the memories, even if they aren't fond ones. Once you actually move, things don't quickly fall into place. You realize how challenging this is when one day you find yourself unconsciously driving to the old place. You have to find a new grocery store, and the new one doesn't arrange its shelves the way the old one did, so shopping takes more time. And if you made your move with a family, not only are you dealing with the change, you're leading others on the journey. They miss the old school, friends, and neighbors. Some people find leaving the end behind so challenging that they go to great lengths to hang on to the old. Consider people who drive a couple of hours to keep a relationship with a hairdresser, banker, or doctor. Even a positive change like the birth of a child requires giving up the way things were. Countless new parents experience tremendous guilt because societal norms demand that they be euphoric at this wonderful new change. And while they love the new life entrusted to their care, they also suffer in silence, wondering if there's something wrong with them, as they grieve the simplicity of the life left behind. Changes at work, like the personal changes we make, require individuals to first leave the old comfort zone, leave it behind before moving to the new. So what can leaders do to address this reality? Stop, pause, and dignify the ending. Celebrate where you came from and what you've achieved before running too fast into the change ahead. Mourn the past, even the parts you're happy to leave behind. Dignifying the ending is an important tradition when someone has died. It's the purpose of funerals and celebrations of life. Retirement parties and graduation celebrations are designed for the same reason. Consider throwing a going away party for what you are leaving behind. The second misconception is that leaders often think that they only need to provide the logic around the change without addressing the emotional impact. Change is hard, and the emotional experience of change is very real and normal. Emotions are not a signal that someone is demotivated or antagonistic. They are evidence of the process we undergo during change. Rather than getting angry, recognize that helping people through the process is as important as facilitating the actual change itself. To support ourselves and others during this time, recognize that people will experience emotions. Expect it, plan for it. It's a curious irony that many changes are designed to improve productivity, efficiency, and morale. Yet in the early stages, productivity, efficiency, and morale all drop. Leaders who fall prey to this second misconception are puzzled when this happens. They often respond by presenting facts and data on why the change makes sense. And what they fail to realize is that the challenge they must meet is not a logical one. It's an emotional one. The most powerful leadership tool is readily accessible to all of us. It is compassion. Compassion for others and compassion for yourself. When people act unlike themselves, pause and recognize that's how they're dealing with the change. Be patient with them. Be patient with yourself. Remember who the person usually is and not who they seem to be in this challenging situation. The last misconception is my favorite. People resist change. There are a lot of misconceptions around change, and none so pervasive or dangerous to the ultimate success of change efforts than the mistaken assumption that people resist change. What would you think of parents who decided they wanted kindergarten to come as a huge surprise for their child? On the first day of kindergarten, they put their kid in the car, drove to the school, and they announced, "This is kindergarten. You're going to like it here. You're going to learn a lot. You're going to make some friends. I'll pick you up later." How is that child likely to react? They'll probably throw a fit. Parents seem to know this, so they don't surprise their little people with kindergarten. What do? They prepare the child. They talk about the change, and they don't just talk about it once. They talk about it over and over again. They don't convene a family meeting and bring out a fancy PowerPoint presentation. They engage with the child. They invite questions. They let their little person talk to the big kids who have already gone to kindergarten, like brothers, sisters, neighbors, and cousins. These kids can give credible firsthand testimonials of what kindergarten is like. They may drive their child to the school and introduce them to the teacher. Many start with preschool. They involve the child in decision-making, such as shopping for clothes or school supplies. When parents do these things, how does the child react on the first day of kindergarten? They're excited. They're motivated. Just try to keep them home. They get up early, dress themselves, and anxiously anticipate the first day of the major change. So, do we resist change? This example and thousands of similar ones in your own life suggest it's not change we resist, it's the unknown. Our challenge in leading change is to make the unknown more knowable. Leaders do not have a great track record on preparing others for change. They're often accused of not caring about people, but the evidence is overwhelmingly against that theory. Leaders typically spend an extraordinary amount of time thinking about how employee morale and how changes, especially major ones, will impact people. Unfortunately, they do this among their own peers, usually behind closed doors. What they fail to do is to imprint the change early and frequently enough that people can successfully navigate the change. There are countless examples of employees hearing about major changes in the media. When leaders do try to prepare employees for change, they often do it in the form of a one-time formal communication that does little to help people process the emotions or get questions answered. Leaders comfort themselves by calling that communication, but we know from our work at Tero that one-way communication is a very narrow definition. To be effective, communication must be two-way. When the change is a large one, it must be frequent. In the same way, parents use tools like storytelling, listening, and inspiring visions of the future to imprint the massive change of kindergarten, leaders who actively engage people will find greater success in leading change. We'll close by considering one of the fastest growing demographic groups, the centenarians. These are individuals who have reached the ripe old age of 100 or more. When scientists study this group of long livers, they discover some rather surprising findings. We might expect that these people live lives that are not stressful. Not so. For many, it was quite the opposite. We might expect these people embraced a healthy lifestyle. Again, not so. Some were moderate drinkers, others were teetotalers. Most didn't follow strict dietary guidelines, and time at the gym, that didn't factor in. So what do these long livers have in common? Their ability to adapt to change in a positive way. Change is not just a recipe for organizational strength and survival, it's also a recipe for long lives. If you enjoyed this content, subscribe to Tero's YouTube channel, join Tero's social media community, and visit Tero.com to check out the in-depth training Tero offers on change and other leadership topics. Thanks for watching.